In this video, we'll be taking a look at 5 college basketball games happening on February 14, 2026, and providing you with free team picks and total picks for each one of those games, so 10 picks in total. Welcome back to Cash Out Sports. Let's dive right into it. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe and to click the bell icon to get notified as soon as these videos get released so that you have more time to plan out your bets as we provide these videos on a daily basis. I can guarantee that you'll have all the important information that you'll need on these 5 college basketball games after fully watching this video. One more thing before we start. If you would like to gain access to our best exclusive sports picks to take your journey to the next level, then check out our Patreon in the link down below, where we offer our best single picks, parlay picks, and much more. Now let's get started. Siena versus Marist. McCann Arena turns into a bit of a pressure cooker when these two get together, and both teams walk in knowing this is not just another February box score. Marist has that familiar identity, tough guards who chase you off your spots, and a coaching staff that is completely comfortable winning games that feel like a root canal instead of a shootout. Their home defensive numbers back that up. They have been one of the stingier units in the country in their own gym, and that is not an accident. The perimeter group with physical wings and connected help defenders makes it hard to run simple offense, and the front court by committee, with big bodies rotating through the paint, quietly keeps teams to one shot more often than not. Even without a fully healthy front line all season, they still lean on that glass work and their structure, and they tend not to hand away easy transition points or live ball turnovers that lead to fireworks the other way. Siena walks in as the so-called underdog, but the gap between these two on the floor feels more like a crack than a canyon. The Saints already put a 19-point beating on Marist in the first meeting, and that was not some fluky night where every bank 3 dropped. It reflected how their improved offense and size can stretch and stress even a very good defense. They are in year 2 of this staff, and you can see it. The spacing looks cleaner, the ball moves with purpose, and they are more willing to trust different guys to carry them for a few possessions rather than living on one hero. Gavin Doty's control, Justice Schultz's ability to hit tough shots, and wings who can both shoot and drive give them answers when the first action is taken away. When they go to bigger looks with bodies like Antonio Chandler or Francis Fairfax next to a true 5, they can actually challenge Marist's usual edge on the boards instead of getting bullied. The interesting twist is that Siena is doing this with a shorter bench than anyone planned. Reed Ducharme is still out with the shoulder, Tasman Goodrick is done for the year with the knee, and freshman guard Owen Schlager has been sidelined by his ribs, which forced this team to grow up fast and force the rotation to harden around the guys who are available. Tajay Jones has been dealing with a back issue, so even when he is in uniform there is some uncertainty, and that has pushed others into bigger roles they have mostly handled. You can see it in spots like the Western New York trip and the Ryder game, where Siena leaned on toughness and depth of responsibility rather than depth of bodies. They have already gone into tricky gyms and found ways to hang around when the whistle, the crowd, and the opponent's energy were all running against them. Marist still has their own weapons, of course. Elijah Lewis is very much on the floor, not a rumor on an injury report, and he gives them a real late clock bucket getter who can change a possession with one tough drive or pull up. The transfers Justin Menard and Ryjan Blackwell have hit nicely. One is a steady all-around guard, the other is instant offense off the bench, and that combination lets Marist keep an adult on the ball for most of the night. Jason Schofield has carved out a starting role in the middle. Tarek Watson's knee issue has forced more responsibility onto him and the rest of the bigs, and that has not broken the defense yet. The question is whether that mix, even with the crowd behind it, actually separates enough from a Siena team that already solved this puzzle once and has the shooting to punish any overhelp. Here is the thing, when you look at how these teams actually play, especially late in games, the idea of one of them cruising away from the other is hard to picture. Both are well coached, both value the ball, and both have grown comfortable in tight finishes where every trip feels like it carries a little extra weight. Marist's home reputation is deserved, but Siena's combination of shot-making, rebounding effort, and composure against pressure travel pretty well. With the Saints catching points rather than laying them, and with the matchup itself suggesting another possession-by-possession grind where either team could plausibly win it in the last minute, it is hard not to lean toward the side that can lose the game and still cash for you. As our first pick for this matchup, the Siena Saints to cover the spread as underdogs is our full game side pick. Siena and Marist almost seem to agree with each other on one thing: life is better when the game is played in the half court. Their recent history together reads like a playlist of grinders, last year's one-point battle, this season's 69-50 meeting, and a bunch of nights where neither team looked eager to push the pace just for fun. Both coaching staffs are happy to call sets, walk the ball up after makes, and let defenses get organized, and that alone trims possessions off the top. Marist, especially, loves to turn games into long, thoughtful possessions. At home, they have built a reputation for guarding their own rim like it owes them money, stringing together stops with disciplined shell defense rather than wild gambling. Their numbers at McCann back it up. The Red Foxes grade out as one of the more efficient home defenses in the country, and that comes from forcing you to play deep into the clock and finish through size and bodies instead of in space. They also base a lot of their offense off cutting and reading the floor, not quick hitting threes in early offense. That style produces some beautiful basketball when it is humming, but it also eats away at the clock chunk by chunk, possession after possession. Siena has quietly drifted in the same direction this year. They came into the season with the idea of being better offensively, and they are, yet they have not turned into a track meet outfit. The tempo metrics put them near the slower end of the national spectrum, and you can see why when you watch them. Doty usually organizes things, Schultz picks his spots rather than forcing, and the ball often touches the post or high elbow before anyone even thinks about a quick pull. When they lean on bigger lineups because of the injuries, with Chandler, Folfak, and a true center rotating through the front court, it naturally encourages more deliberate possessions and more focus on getting the ball into good spots instead of firing early. Injuries have nudged both teams even further toward that kind of game. Siena's missing wings and guards cut into their ability to roll out four-guard lineups and just run, so they lean more on structure, execution, and wearing you down over the course of the shot clock. Marist losing a rolling big like Watson from the mix means fewer easy lobs and deep seals, and more trips that depend on timing, screening, and Lewis or another guard creating something late. That tends to show up as long stretches where defenses are ahead of offenses. And both teams have to live with contested looks instead of free ones. There are, of course, nights when Siena's shooting spikes and they hang a big number. That Ryder game with the barrage from three is still fresh. And nights when Marist's defense turns live ball turnovers into quick buckets and the score jumps. Honestly, those outbursts stand out precisely because they are not the baseline expectation. When you zoom out, most of their recent work against conference peers has landed in ranges where every made or missed free throw in the last 2 minutes feels massive, and that is usually a good sign if you are thinking about the lower scoring side of things. This spot carries real weight in the standings, and that usually tightens everyone up a bit. Coaches shorten rotations, whistle at their guards to pull the ball back out instead of forcing a semi-transition look, and spend timeouts talking about valuing each possession, not about racing the other team to 100. With two defenses that already grade out as solid, one arena where points are rarely cheap, and both benches comfortable winning games that feel like a rock fight, the most reasonable expectation is another contest where the score creeps rather than explodes. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. North Texas versus Temple. On paper, this one looks simple. Home team with the better record, comfy building, small number, move along. Look a little closer and it feels a lot more slippery. Temple is sitting near the top of the American at 15-9, while North Texas comes in at 14-11, so the standings make it look like a host that has things under control against a mid-table visitor. The problem with that neat little story is that North Texas still plays the kind of basketball that turns every game into a grind. The type that quietly drags everyone down into its pace, where a couple of possessions either way decide everything. They are still slow, patient, and annoying to play against, with a defense that actually travels and a style that does not really care if the game is pretty. It just cares if it is close with 5 minutes left. Temple, under Adam Fisher, leans the other way. They are much happier when the ball is popping. The guards are in rhythm, and the Liakouras center has that buzz where every jumper feels like it is worth 4 points instead of 3. The Owls score in the mid-70s on average and shoot it well enough that their offense often punches above its weight, but the defense is much more forgiving, allowing opponents to hang around and sometimes turn what should be routine wins into coin flips. That is the kind of profile that looks good on a standings graphic and a little less comforting when you are asking it to win with margin against a team that specializes in making favorites sweat. North Texas comes in with confidence, not just hope. They just handled Memphis and took care of UTSA on the road, and those are the sort of results that give a roster belief that its formula works even when the opponent has more hype or a louder gym. They have a guard in Jashawn Stevenson who is comfortable living in late shot clock situations, which is basically the house style for the Mean Green, and a front court rotation with guys like Dylan Arnett, Reese Robinson, and Cole Franklin that soaks up contact, rebounds, and does all the unglamorous stuff that keeps them within striking distance. That matters when you are not being asked to run away from anyone. You are just being asked to hang around, trade body blows, and let your closer handle the last couple of trips. Temple is not exactly short on firepower. Darian Ford has been on a heater, Aiden Tobiason and Jordan Mason stretch the floor, and the backcourt as a whole has that green light vibe that can blow a game open in a 3-minute burst. But that kind of shot making comes with a little volatility, and when the jumper goes cold for a stretch, this is not a team that naturally slows things down and locks you in a defensive cage. It is more of a rhythm team, and rhythm is exactly what North Texas is built to disrupt, with a tempo that lives in the mid-60s in possessions and an approach that forces you to grind your way to every good look. Injuries are not throwing any wild cards into this one either, which is sneaky important for a matchup like this. North Texas has Will McClendon ruled out for the season. Temple has a Jay Smith done for the year with a shoulder issue, and that is all already baked into the rotations we have been seeing. So what you see on recent film, with North Texas leaning heavily on its core minutes and Temple riding its main guards, is what you are getting. In a game that projects to be slow, physical, and probably decided in the last couple of trips, grabbing the points with the team that is more comfortable living in the mud starts to feel less like a gamble and more like simple math. As our first pick for this matchup, the North Texas Mean Green to cover the spread as underdogs is our full game side pick. You have one team that wants to play in the mud, one that is perfectly happy to get out and flow a little, and a number that sits low enough to make you hesitate if you are thinking about points but not low enough to scare you off the idea. North Texas games are not exactly track meets, but they are not rock fights every night either. They score in the low 70s on average and give up points in the mid-60s, which is a respectable amount of offense packed into a modest number of possessions. Temple, on the other hand, lives in that mid-70s scoring range, with opponents usually landing right around the high 60s, so when you blend their usual game scripts together, you end up in a combined zone that nudges toward the high 130s in a normal outing. Here is the thing that trips people up. Slow pace does not always mean low score. If both teams are reasonably efficient, a mid-60s possession game can still turn into a scoreboard that looks lively enough, especially when one side is comfortable drawing fouls and stacking free throws like Temple does and the other side, like North Texas, is good enough at grinding decent looks out of long possessions. If you sketch out a typical game where both teams land near their season scoring averages, you are already flirting with a number that sits above what is being projected. It is also worth talking about how these teams behave in this specific building. Temple at home has shown a tendency to get involved in games where the second half opens up, partly because whistles tighten, partly because tired legs get a little lazy, and partly because those guards just keep hunting shots. North Texas, even with its slower style, has been involved in plenty of finishes where a fairly pedestrian first 30 minutes suddenly turns spicy once both benches realize the game is sitting right on top of a key number. We have all watched that kind of game, where it feels like an underscript for most of the night. Then you blink and the last 90 seconds include 6 free throws, a couple of quick threes, and a very different-looking final score. The season trends are a bit of a tug of war. North Texas has leaned more to the under on the whole, which makes sense for a team that plays deliberately and prides itself on defense, while Temple at home has pushed several totals over thanks to that scoring punch and a defense that, at times, is more permissive than punishing. Those two tendencies actually work together here rather than canceling out, because a slightly discounted number pulled down by North Texas perception meets an offense-friendly home gym and a visitor that is fully capable of doing its part. Injuries are static, which quietly matters for the math. With a Jay Smith and Will McClendon already ruled out for the year, both staffs have settled into rotations that have produced the current scoring and efficiency profiles we are using. There is no late scratch of a primary scorer or surprise depth loss that would shove this toward a true grind, so the offensive baselines we have seen recently are a fair reflection of what we are likely getting. Picture a game that ambles along into the last 4 minutes sitting a few points shy of where you need it, a 1 or 2 possession margin, both coaches with fouls to give and timeouts to use, and Temple's guard still attacking while North Texas responds with patient but assertive half-court sets. That is exactly the sort of environment where the clock keeps stopping, the whistle keeps blowing, and the total can creep past expectations almost quietly. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. Bradley versus Southern Illinois. Bradley walks into Carbondale with the cleaner-looking record, and that alone pulls a lot of casual money their way. On paper, 17-9 against 12-14 sounds like a simple choice, like you just back the team that has been stacking wins. History even leans that way, since Bradley has taken most of the recent meetings, 8 wins in the last 10 and 3 straight in the most recent clashes, so it is very easy to let those past results whisper in your ear. The thing is, that story starts to wobble once you look at how these two actually trade possessions right now instead of just counting final scores. Southern Illinois grades out with the stronger overall efficiency margin, sitting at about plus 4.9 compared with Bradley around plus 2.7, and that gap is built on a real difference in how they guard. The Salukis are giving up roughly 100 points per 100 possessions, while Bradley is closer to 108, so one team is living on a far tighter defensive leash. SIU also plays a touch quicker, hovering around 69 to 70 possessions per game, while Bradley tends to play a couple of trips slower, so the Salukis are not only tougher per trip, they are also comfortable nudging the pace when the game calls for it. That ties in with the season box scores, where Southern Illinois holds opponents to about 71 points a night on just over 42% from the field and barely 30% from beyond the arc. Bradley, on the other hand, is allowing closer to 73 points with opponents shooting almost 45% overall and nearly 36% from 3, which is a very different feel on the defensive end. So you end up with this funny split where Bradley racks up more wins, but they often make you sweat defensively, while Southern Illinois has fewer wins but a profile that looks more like a solid tournament-style group than a team hovering under the break-even mark. That is where the building starts to matter too. Banterra Center has long had a reputation as one of the tougher gyms in the Missouri Valley, with Southern Illinois winning close to 3/4 of their home games there and even rolling off a 33-game home winning streak at one point, and that kind of history tends to show up in tight lines. You can almost picture the noise on a Saturday when a team like Bradley, that has had your number, walks in and the fans smell a chance to flip the script. From a personnel standpoint, nothing really scrambles the picture right now. Bradley comes in clean with no major injuries on the report, and Southern Illinois only has a single rotation guard tagged as questionable with a vague issue, so neither team is getting its identity ripped apart before tip. What you are left with is a home side that grades out better possession by possession, playing in a building that has historically tilted close games, carrying a bit of payback energy after that 4-point loss in Peoria where Bradley pulled out a 73-69 win. Bradley has been riding some hot shooting stretches and a fair bit of success in tight finishes, while the market has gradually started treating Southern Illinois less like an afterthought and more like a proper favorite when the numbers demand it. Honestly, that combination of defensive edge, home floor juice, and a short margin to clear is exactly the kind of setup where backing the supposedly less shiny record can still make the most sense. As our first pick for this matchup, the Southern Illinois Salukis to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. Bradley is averaging around 77 points while allowing about 73, and Southern Illinois is living in the mid-70s on offense while giving up just over 71. So when you mash those scoring habits together, you naturally land in a combined range that feels more like the low 150s than anything sleepy. Their points allowed, on the other hand, line up right around where that projected scoring window sits, which makes this feel like a matchup where the normal outcome is not slow, it is lively. KenPom's tempo numbers back that up. Neither team plays at a crawl, with Bradley sitting in the high 60s for adjusted tempo and Southern Illinois right around 69 to 70 possessions, which is firmly in the normal to slightly brisk lane for Division I. That style tends to reward any stretch where the game loosens up, and in college ball, those stretches arrive more often than people think, especially when both teams can handle the ball. Recent form really leans into that idea. Bradley just hung 95 points on Belmont in a game that soared to a combined total of 179, which is not what you see from a team stuck in the mud. Southern Illinois answered with 86 on Evansville while shooting over 52% from the floor. And both of those performances hit the board this week, not months ago. That kind of rhythm matters. Players remember when shots have been falling, coaches feel a bit more comfortable green-lighting early looks, and fans tend to feed into that pace once the scoreboard starts moving. The matchup details add even more fuel. Bradley protects the ball at a top-shelf level, keeping turnovers under 10 per game, and still manages to squeeze opponents into more than 14 turnovers, which rates around top 40 nationally. That combination of taking care of your own possessions and stealing extra ones is a dream setup for extra runouts, transition threes, and second chance points. Southern Illinois quietly does the little things that help a total tilt upward too, shooting over 46% from the field, rebounding well enough to keep extra chances alive, and turning some of their defensive pressure into live ball turnovers that flow straight into offense instead of half-court grind. The first meeting between these two finished 73-69 for a combined 142, which slid under a very aggressive posted total at the time. Now the projection sits a step lower than that earlier number, but still a couple of buckets above what they actually combined for in that game, which creates a small pocket of value if you believe what their current form is telling you. Given the recent offensive explosions, the slightly quicker rhythm Southern Illinois tends to find at home, and the very real chance of a whistle-filled finish with late fouls and free throws in a close conference battle, the current total feels just a bit cautious rather than stretched. Here is the thing, that is not a guarantee. It is a scenario built around pace, style, and how these two have actually been playing in the last week. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. Illinois State versus UIC. Illinois State walks into Chicago looking like the polished resume team that odds makers love. Better record, cleaner scoring margin, and that efficient, tidy style that usually earns you the slight favorite label even in a noisy Missouri Valley road gym. On the stat sheet, they score in the mid-70s, keep opponents tucked under the high 60s, rebound well, and generally treat live ball turnovers like a bad habit they gave up years ago. It all screams trust the solid road favorite, at least if you only stare at the numbers. Reality, though, has been a little more stubborn. These two already saw each other earlier in the season, and Illinois State was laying a much heavier number at home while UIC strolled in, shrugged, and walked out with a gritty 63-59 win. The Flames squeezed the life out of that game, held the Redbirds to ugly shooting, and proved they were not just another schedule filler. Since that meeting, Illinois State has kept stacking wins, but their trips away from home have felt like balancing on a tightrope, a bit wobbly against the spread and not nearly as trustworthy as that neat resume suggests. UIC, on the other hand, has found that sweet spot where effort, scheme, and confidence all pull in the same direction. They have covered the number often lately, defended their home floor with some pride, and turned Credit Union 1 Arena into the kind of place where favorites start glancing at the scoreboard more than the clock. Their style is classic underdog stuff. They scrap on the glass, they poke at the ball, they invite mistakes, and they lean into trips to the free throw line, which adds those slow, annoying points that keep a game tight possession after possession. It is not always pretty, but it travels well, and it looks even better with a home crowd behind it. When a matchup feels like it will shrink down to a late 1 or 2 possession grind, small details start to matter more than shiny averages. Who is more comfortable in a messy finish? Who keeps their composure when whistles get loud and every rebound feels like the last bread roll at dinner? Recent results and the way these teams have behaved in those high-stress spots point toward the home side being built for exactly that kind of scrap, especially when the market is still nudging more respect toward the road team. As our first pick for this matchup, the UIC Flames to cover the spread as underdogs is our full game side pick. Odds makers are hinting at something more controlled, something that stays in a tighter scoring band, which feels cautious when you remember how these two actually score across the season. Illinois State and UIC together average into the low 150s, both carry positive scoring margins, and neither team treats offense like a chore. On paper, that smaller number feels like it is daring you to trust a slower, more conservative script. Part of that caution comes from history. They have stacked a run of meetings where the final score landed under the total, and UIC has a handful of trend notes that tilt lower scoring in certain spots, like specific days or roles. If you only live in that historical lane, you can talk yourself into another grind, another game where the rim feels a little smaller. Here is the thing, the current version of Illinois State has been playing with a much livelier scoreboard. They have spent a good chunk of recent games in a rhythm where the offense flows, shots fall, and totals have been nudged higher more often than not, especially deep into the season when teams know each other well. Those mid to high 70s and occasional 80s on their side are not outliers anymore. They are becoming part of their personality. UIC is not exactly allergic to points either. They score in the mid-70s, they get to the line often, and their pressure style tends to turn half-court possessions into scramble plays that both teams can run off. Turnovers do not just create steals, they create fast breaks, mismatches, and quick threes. That kind of tempo does not have to look flashy, it just has to repeat itself enough times to quietly push the total upward. Picture the second half with both teams already feeling each other out, whistles tightening, and foul counts climbing. Bonus situations mean free throws, and free throws mean the clock stops while the scoreboard keeps ticking. A game that starts out looking like a low-scoring grind can suddenly slide into a more open finish when both teams are trading trips to the line and still hunting in transition. That is how a matchup that looks safe for a modest total suddenly lands in the low to mid-140s instead of settling quietly in the 120s. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. Davidson versus Dayton. Davidson Wildcats at Dayton Flyers on Sunday, February 15, 2026, 1 o'clock in the afternoon Pacific Time. UD Arena under the lights, national television, 2:15 to 9:10 squads walking in looking like mirror images on paper, but the matchup story tilts in one direction once you start peeling things back. Home has not just been friendly to Dayton, it has been flat-out hostile to visitors, with 14 wins in their last 16 in that building and 7 straight home victories when the opponent wears Davidson across the chest. That kind of pattern is not just noise, especially in a college gym where the student section feels like it is 3 feet from the baseline and every whistle sounds a little louder for the home side. Davidson has been the kind of road team bettors love to talk about in group chats, covering more often than not away from home and generally showing they do not scare easily when the band is playing someone else's fight song. They walk into other people's gyms, knock down shots, and hang around long enough to make everyone uncomfortable. On the season, they are winning the scoring margin battle by right around 2 possessions, putting up points in the mid-70s while holding opponents several points below that, and they lean into a clear identity built on spacing and shot making. It is not a smash-mouth group, it is more of a rhythm team, the kind that can look ordinary for 5 minutes and then suddenly string together 3 or 4 clean trips that swing momentum. Dayton's overall scoring profile looks even louder, sitting a tick higher in points scored while still staying positive in scoring margin, but the way they get there really matters for a spread conversation. They live at the free throw line and they protect the ball, and that combination is a quiet superpower. More makes it the stripe per night than their opponents, plus a healthy edge and turnover margin means extra possessions and cleaner late game math, especially in a tight number where every empty trip feels like a small disaster. When a team can close out games with free throws and avoid gifting live ball giveaways, it often sneaks past the final margin that looked a little too high on paper. Now, the ugly part. Recent form has not been kind to Dayton, with a stretch that reads like a frustration reel, 1 win in their last 6 outings and no covers in that same run, including several losses by double digits. That sounds like a giant red flag, and honestly, most people scrolling scores on their phones see that and immediately lean the other way. But context sneaks in here. They have taken punches in some tricky league spots, often as a bigger favorite, and that recent pain has already been baked into how people price them. Their against the spread record on the season sits well below 50%, while Davidson's mark is closer to a coin flip or slightly better, so the perception gap has opened up. Head-to-head, though, the history stays stubborn. Across the last 10 meetings between these two, Dayton has come out on top every single time, 10 wins out of 10, and has covered roughly 7 of those, leaving Davidson with a perfect 0 in the win column during that stretch. In this building, it is even harsher, with the Wildcats coming in, playing hard, and still walking out empty-handed in 7 straight tries. Trends alone do not decide a wager, but they do tell you who has repeatedly dictated terms in this matchup. Stylistically, what makes this spot intriguing is how the identities line up. Davidson wants to shoot its way into comfort, and when those jumpers fall, they can absolutely hang with almost anyone in the conference. Dayton, though, pressures you in different ways. They drag you into a game where every careless handle gets punished and where the foul count starts to feel lopsided just as the crowd reaches peak volume. In a short spread environment, that recipe of home court energy, whistle pressure, extra free throws, and turnover edge tends to carry real weight. It is not that Davidson cannot hang around, they can, but the more possessions that pile up, the more those small structural edges usually start to show. As our first pick for this matchup, the Dayton Flyers to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. Season-long numbers paint a pretty clear picture. Davidson tends to live in the low to mid-70s on the scoreboard while giving up points in the high 60s, and Dayton usually plays from a base that is a little higher on both sides of the ball, with their games often landing comfortably in the 70s for them and the low 70s for their opponents. If you simply added those averages together, you would land at a combined total that sits meaningfully above the kind of number the books are hanging here, which is why this matchup feels like a quiet test of whether you trust long-term data or recent noise more. Recent noise, though, has been anything but quiet. Davidson's last batch of games has featured scorelines where they blow the doors off someone with triple-digit scoring one night, then grind through more modest totals the next. But the common thread is that when their offense finds rhythm, the game opens up fast. They can jump from a 30-point half to a 45-point half without changing the roster, just by getting cleaner looks and finding a bit of swagger from deep. Their defense is solid enough to avoid pure track meets most nights, but it is not the kind of lockdown unit that drags every game into the low 60s. Dayton's recent totals have tilted toward higher scoring affairs as well. Several of their latest outings have featured opponents hitting big numbers against them while Dayton still puts up respectable totals of their own, and that combination has turned into a friendly environment for overs in their recent trend line. The defense has leaked more than the staff would like, and while that is a headache for the coaching office, it is a gift if you are simply asking whether points will show up. Their offense remains capable, their shot profile stays balanced, and their habit of getting to the free throw line keeps the scoreboard moving even when the half-court sets bog down. Head-to-head between these programs across the last 10 meetings, the combined scoring has averaged right around the low 140s. That sits very close to the type of total you see for this game, which might make it feel like a coin flip on the surface. The subtle difference is that some of those past meetings came with slightly stingier defensive versions of these teams, and with different personnel shaping tempo and shot selection. Current trends show both playing games that sneak into, or even push past, that zone more often, especially in this part of the season when legs are a little heavier and whistles tend to come quicker in tight conference battles. One underrated factor for totals in college hoops is how each roster and each staff handle close finishes. These two profiles, with one leaning into perimeter shooting bursts and the other leaning into a free throw advantage and ball security, set up nicely for an extended sequence of late possessions if the game stays within a few scores. The trailing side has to foul, the leading side has to hit free throws, and every one of those trips turns a quiet 130-something combined score into something that creeps higher than you expect. If both teams come anywhere close to their typical offensive efficiency and the whistle is even moderately active, it becomes more likely that the final number lands in that low to mid-140s pocket that has showed up so often in their histories and recent forms. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. That's all for now, so if you have any other games you would like reviewed, then leave a comment down below with the game you would like analyzed, subscribe to our channel, leave a like on this video, and we'll get to it as soon as we possibly can. We would also love to hear your opinion on the picks presented to you in this video, whether you agree or disagree with them, so leave a comment down below and do let us know.